What's up? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. I am very persuasive, and I have Dave back with me, even though I'm pretty sure at the end of the last episode, you're like, I don't know if I'll be back, but I'm glad that I got him back because it's Friday. I don't know when the hell you'll be downloading this or when I'll get it up, hopefully in a couple days, but it's Friday, so I feel like I was telling Dave before the show how it always seems like we're in the right mindset. It's definitely hard to continue to find the energy and time to keep doing things you enjoy because we're so consumed with things we have to do, but I'm glad that some way it just keeps happening. And the nice thing about having a friend that you can do a podcast with is that we can do something spontaneously, like, hey, you want to do one tomorrow, and we can do it. So thanks, Dave.
We can spontaneously fill in a void here, an empty space.
Yeah.
I have no guests. Please come.
Yeah, it's funny. I was thinking about you earlier today because I was telling you how I got in a debate with my brother, and it's funny how we're so different. And we were talking about, like, I don't even know how we got into the subject, but we got into the subject of like history and stuff like that, and how, like, I'm intrigued with like philosophy and history and all this stuff. And he was just like saying how pointless it seems. And he's like, I just like sports. He's like, I like basketball, I like cars. He's like, that's my thing. And I'm just like, yeah, but I'm like, there's something up, like, it seems like you do a little bit of soul searching when you learn about philosophy or you learn about history. You know, it's just like that common quote, if you don't learn history, you tend to repeat it, or something along those lines.
I love when you still do that. You have, like, I read this quote somewhere, and you never get it. You never get it right. You get the spirit of it, but you never get like the exact quote.
But
like,
isn't that the most important
Patrick
part?
Henry once said, like, I hope there's liberty because I'd rather get killed.
Well, yeah. Well, I think that it's funny because I had this similar discussion with him about what's intelligence or what somebody, because I was saying how I'm like, well, I think somebody who knows a little, and you've said this before, so I'll quote you. it is.
So chances are this is not exactly what I said.
No, it might be completely wrong, and that's a whole nother thing. How your memory, you can be so sure of something, and somebody else who was there can have a completely different, like, recall a whole different experience. You're like, wait, we were at the same place. Why are our stories so different?
It's all perspective.
It is, and so. What the fuck was the quote I was getting? Oh, I think you said, I'd rather know a little bit about a lot of things than a lot about a few things.
Yeah.
And I think that does make you a more interesting person. But more importantly, I think it makes you have a better understanding of a lot more different perspectives. A lot more. I sound like an idiot while I'm trying to sound smart. And a lot of different perspectives on things. And I think there is something that I don't. It's weird because me and my brother, for people who don't know who listen to the show, are twins, and we've had, being a twin, you tend to have the same friends because you grew up in the same age group. You go to the same school. We end up having the same hobbies. We played in a band together, and it's so funny how we. It's like I always wonder, like, what happened where me and this other person who had a very similar life end up. Our paths changed so much where I got, like, super intrigued with, like, just learning about history and philosophy and not that I'm an expert in any one of those fields at all, but I was eager to learn about it, and I was intrigued with it enough to research it and try to learn more than I did know. And yet he didn't get intrigued at all with it. And it's funny because it's like, I've said in the past on the show, like, you know, if people want to be happy and you do what makes them happy, then that's great. And I've used I think that phrase to kind of debate the idea of government and, like, laws and stuff like that, and saying that, hey, you know what, like, if you're not harming anybody and if it makes you happy, then why shouldn't you be able to do it, you know? So it's like one of these things about, like, yeah, life is about being happy, and that's a big part of it, but I feel like life's also I think it should be about trying to progress as a person and understand yourself and understand the world around you. And I think that there's a lot of people who are content with never seeing things outside the box and never seeing anything, you know, below the surface. And to me, it's such a weird perspective because I'm so not that I could never understand a person who doesn't want to further understand things. Yeah. Like, to me, like, do you know people like that?
You know what? I'm like that sometimes, and I'm not like that sometimes. I feel like there's stuff that and it could be a timing thing too. There's stuff that I'm like, wow, that's interesting. I'd like to know more about that, and don't bother. And there's stuff that just doesn't interest me at all. I mean, I think it changes from from day to day and topic to topic, really. But I know what you're talking about. There's people that don't care about anything. You could tell them something or try and have a conversation with them about something, and they're like, what's on TV tonight? Who's going to win the amazing race?
Well, we had this conversation about sports once. We were out to eat, and you were talking about how the conversation before and after sports. Did you see me catch myself? Because I almost said we're at the Anchor House, and I'm like, should I say where we were? I'm like, I don't know, whatever, I'll say it. And free advertisement, they owe me a dinner, but we're at the Anchor House and a local restaurant, and we're grabbing something to eat there, and we've gotten this debate about like the sports, but really we both agreed on one thing, on the fact that the conversation before and after the games really is pointless, and it's like my brother's obsessed with sports talk. Like, he's obsessed with the only podcast he listens to, and I can is Bill Simmons' podcast, and just about sports. I'm like, and you've said it before, and I've said it too. I'm like, what does all that conversation analyzing change on the game? Nothing. And I
think there's more. If you were to weigh the amount of talk, if it was something you could measure, I think the actual sport itself is like 10%, and 90% is talk now. Like, there's, in this area, especially with the Patriots, the Red Sox, the Bruins, we have all these championship teams, and like there are so many media outlets now between Nesson and WEEI, and I don't even know them all, but there's so much more talk about an event. As long as a baseball game is, the talk about it goes on for days and days and days, and it absolutely drives me crazy. It's actually driven me away from sports. It's made me not want to like sports, and a season ticket holder for the Patriots, and I used to love going to the games. And this year, I sold all my tickets. My brother and I sold all our tickets for face value, and I watched the Patriots last night, and I was like, shut up. Like, I just want to watch the game. And the difference for me between going to a game and watching it on TV is you're like, it's like you feel like you're stuck in your seat, squished between people that don't shut the fuck up about the game. Just watch the game. I don't care about...
Are you talking about when you're at the game and people around you?
No. When you watch it on TV, I feel like it's just so... Like, there's so much... And the play-by-play, that's important. There's important stuff to know. Don't get me wrong. I think that's an important part of things, but I think it's so overanalyzed that it absolutely ruins the game.
But isn't that a perfect example of, like, okay, if you consider sports just entertainment or whatever, I feel like money will ruin things, because it's like they figure the more, if you can make money from sports talk, and if it keeps selling, ads and stuff like that, then they'll just have more and more of it, even if there's not anything to talk about.
Yeah.
And I have a buddy who works at ESPN, and I remember when the Jeremy Lin thing was happening, when that Asian player who was blown up and came off the bench and like surprised everybody because he could play and stuff. And I was talking to him about it, and he was talking about how like everything at ESPN is a statistic, like literally like every single, the highlight that they open up with, the preview before the Sports Center that they're selling you the story, all that is well thought out, and it's what they use to sell advertisements to their guys. And he was talking about how even Mike and Mike, they would tell them in the morning, like, this is how much time you have to spend talking about Jeremy Lin. And I'm like, how fake is that? Like, how, like, we almost
they measure what people are interested based on search engine results and things like
everything's
that.
Everything's a statistic. Everything.
So like, okay, if that's what people want, that's what we're going to give them. But then it's just like this odd cycle of things, like the Royals for me right now have really just sucked me back into baseball
because they're underdogs.
They're a $94 million payroll, which is like, it's ridiculous. It's like minimum wage baseball. And just watching these guys, like these players are putting their heart and soul. It's like it's such a real sport thing. It reminds me of like, when I used to coach my daughter in sports and watching the excitement on kids' faces. Like, these are grown men that as soon as they step on the field, I perceive them as kids because I don't know anything about them. I don't know, because here in New England, we know everything about every player's personal life, and Tom Brady and Giselle and this and that and all this kind of crazy stuff. So I'm watching this $94 million team play their hearts out, and like they're playing baseball like the way baseball should be played. There's no $30 million man going up there who's supposed to hit a home run every 3 times he gets. They don't have any of that. They got their power hitters square to bunt. They got guys that can steal bases. Their outfield can track and catch. If it's gonna land in the grass, chances are a glove is gonna come between it and the grass. It's really exciting to watch.
But isn't that one of the things that, like, I think what intrigues people with sports? It's the only thing on TV that still seems somewhat real.
It is real, and you know what? Not to interrupt you, but
No.
all the analysis, like every step of the way, all the pundits have been saying, oh, the Royals, they're lucky to get this far, and they've blown everybody away. They've swept everybody, and like 2 games into it, everyone's like, I'm gonna have to change my opinion. I think the Royals are for real. It's like, I don't care what you think or what you don't think. It doesn't impact me. But before every game, this panel of experts has to tell you their prediction. That's
their job. Yeah,
it's ridiculous,
and it's completely meaningless. I've had seasons where I've watched the Celtics, I watch the Celtics every season, but they'll go in a slump, and I'll make a mental note of what the analysts on the radio are saying, and they'll be like, they're over, they need to trade this guy, they need to trade Rondo, they need to whatever, and then literally they'll go on a winning streak, and then I remember that mental note, and I'll pay attention to what they're saying now, and they're like, oh, they're playing so well, I think they can really get far, and then you're thinking to yourself, like, this is such nonsense.
It really is.
They really are just filling in time. They're analyzing the now, because that's what fans do. They overreact when a team loses. They get too hyped when they win. Like, it's
especially around here. And why is that? It's because there's the ubiquitous sports talk. You can't avoid it. It's everywhere.
At first I didn't mind WEI because, 1, we had a bunch of teams that did well, and then 2, it was a great alternative. There's something pleasing about hearing just guys talk. And then that's why I love podcasts so much, because it took like something that I liked at a very censored level, and then it's like, holy shit, there's this other thing that takes what I like about talk radio, which is just guys talking and hearing some maybe interesting perspectives, even though it is still meaningless sports. Sometimes you do get some interesting perspectives, and then takes it a whole nother level. And that's what I think. I think that's what people want. And I think that's what's going to change media, because I think that you can only ride the sports talk thing for so long. But I'm not sure, because sports do have a stranglehold on America, where I just feel like, and this is the thing, this goes, going back to the initial conversation about him saying, oh, well, that's what I like. I like sports. And it's just like, to me, it's like, I'm similar to you. I have lost so much passion for sports, where like I'm a person who, when I first started dating, my girlfriend, she used to hate the fact that I would like force us to fall asleep to ESPN every night. Like she's like all day she's just hear dun 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 dun, like in her head. She's like, and I'm like, I used to fall asleep to ESPN all the time, just watch all the highlights, keep up with everything that's going on, and I just now I don't watch ESPN at all. I literally will watch the game I want to watch, and then turn it off or move on to the next thing. And I realized, like, holy shit, like how much of my life has changed? Nothing. Like how do I feel like I missed out on anything? No. Like I don't feel like I'm missing. Yeah. It's like they do a great job of making you feel like,
you do it. You definitely they do a good job of sucking you in and making you feel like everything.
If you're not like the whole world revolves around the story,
any good entity is gonna do that. I know I'm a huge Pearl Jam fan, and when they tour, I get sucked into this whole thing, like, especially by other fans, when you read about like, oh, I've been to 70 shows or I've been to 40 shows. I've been to a dozen. It makes me feel inadequate. Like I'm not proving myself.
You've only been to a dozen?
Yeah, I've only been to a dozen.
Really?
Yeah. But
it's actually surprising to me.
Yeah, I have my surge in seeing them has increased recently, but I have like 200 bootlegs that I listen to, like in rotation. So I've heard so many different shows, and but I always feel like they have a show tonight, and I feel like when they announced this tour pretty much up the middle of the United States, I was like, man, I gotta get to one of these shows, because it's what you do. And then I'm like, how can I do this? Can I drive out to Ohio? That was the closest driving distance one. Can I afford to fly? What's a flight from here on Southwest? I can get there and back and get a ticket and this and that and stuff like that. And
the Malaysia Airlines are cheap right now.
I know, huh? I'd have to wear my special suit, but But then I felt like, oh, I got to do this. I get wrapped up in it, and then I don't buy tickets, and the shows are going on right now. I'm like, I'm enjoying it through other fans, through Twitter and things like that, which is a really cool experience. And I'll hear the bootlegs when they come out. They're playing their shows on Pearl Jam Radio, and I'm like, nothing replaces the excitement of actually being at a show. But my heart is still beating. I'm still breathing, and life goes on.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point with almost everything. I feel like no matter how bad or whatever the situation is, like I think we all learn that life does go on eventually. Like it's so many times in life that we feel like my life is never going to be the same. I'm never going to recover from this. Or, you're so upset because you missed something or whatever. And then like you move on and you're like, wow. And I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but you said an interesting thing. I remember last time we did a podcast before we started doing a show, you were talking to my girlfriend about, she was talking about how like, because for people who don't know, we're having a kid and she was like, oh, but I just hope that, our relationship stays the same and it doesn't, cause any friction or something like that. And she's like, I don't want things to, the important word change. And that's what got your attention. You're like, well, change isn't a bad thing. And you jumped right onto that. And you made this really good point about change. And it's funny how we I don't know what it is, but we just always assume, and I think maybe because we're creatures of habit and there's something about being comfortable. So
yeah, it's a comfort thing.
Yeah. So like change, it always sounds scary because it's not what I am right now. And it's something different that I have to adapt to or get used to, or I might not like, and I think I like, so it's, and you made that really good point about change. And it's funny because you don't get a lot of people who look at change that way. And
I'm older than you guys. So I've been through that phase of like, I want things to stay the way they are. And I've feared a change for a lot of my life. I've had the same job for 20 years. You know what I mean? So there's still a part of me that likes to hold on to security. But I've always been afraid of change, and I don't know where that comes from. But in the last 10 years or so, like I embrace change. I look for things that challenge me, because change is, like I said to you and Gina, change is the only thing that allows you to grow. Your relationship will grow as a couple as a result of the change of bringing a child into this world. And like you have to embrace that and look forward to that, see that as opportunity rather than, a lot of people look at change as destroying what exists, but really it's creating what can exist. You know what I mean? If you look at it from a different perspective, it helps you look forward to change rather than fear it.
And bringing a kid to this world is, I will say, like, it is fucking scary. Like,
I remember, man, it's a scary feeling, and you know what? There's like people say, you're going to be great parents,
but that's the thing. Everybody always says that, and I'm like, and I feel I've had a lot of people say that to me, and I feel like every time somebody says that to me, only makes me more scared of being a shitty parent. And the one thing I'm like, and it's funny because I had, when James Corbett was on the show last, and we were talking, I think we got in a conversation about kids, and I know he has a son, I believe, and we were talking about what's a really important lesson to teach them, and he was talking about, and something that I completely agree with, and I've thought a lot about myself, is not so much teach a kid a thing, but just teach them how to think in general, and the ability to question things and think things. And I even quoted Alex Jones, because I'm like, it's funny because I remember a long time ago, I remember somebody saying something, Alex Jones saying that he told his kids once, he's like, if you take one lesson away from me, I might be giving more credit, because then this, who knows, this quote might be completely wrong, but he said something along the lines of, like, he told his kid, like, hey, just remember, everybody has an agenda, even me. And it's like this idea of like question everything, and it stuck with me, not so much because maybe I might even be looking at the quote in a different way than he meant it, but I always looked at it as, you should question everything, even if it's what your parents are saying. Like a lot of really interesting politicians, that people that I'm like, wow, he's really well spoken, and he has well thought out ideas, and there's not many of them out there. But like, I can't remember which one it was. If it was Dennis Kucinich or Ron Paul or somebody that I'm a fan of, or Jesse Ventura. I think it might be Jesse Ventura. I think I heard Tel Ventura, his son, talk about this, how at the dinner table and stuff like that, how he would want them to debate about things, and he wanted to hear his kid's side, and he wanted him to, if they disagreed, to say that's, and I think that's so important. Like, to me, it's like one thing I hope to do, and consciously I'm going to try to do my best. And I don't think I'll have a problem, but of course I can't say that, because once you get there, who knows how you're going to handle things. But what I'm going to try to do is, I want to be questioned, and then for the reason of me finding out why I want something, or why I'm telling the child. Like, I think it's completely okay for a kid to be like, why do you want me to do this? And then and just be like, oh, don't just say, oh, do what I say now. I've
had those experiences with my daughter where I'll say she'll want to do something and I'll say no, or she won't want to do something that I'm telling her to do, and she'll question me, and we'll discuss it, and she's changed my perspective. I think a lot of times as a parent, you have like, you as a parent, you have to make decisions. That's your authority position, is to make command decisions. There's no, well, let me get back to you. You have to make a decision, and you make it based on, broad information that you have available to you. And initially, boom, that sounds good or that sounds bad. So you make a decision. You have to be the authority. But then if you have a discussion about it, and your child can convince you of otherwise, all the power to them. I think that, I know growing up, yes was yes and no was no, and there was no discussion in my house. But I enjoy the conversation that I have with my daughter, and I know there's a number of times where I would say no to something, and we talk about it, and the next thing I know, we're doing it. But it's not I don't see it as a weakness as a parent. I see it as a strength to take the time to listen to your child, make them feel safe to question your authority and question your decision. And my daughter understands that when I tell her something, if I strongly back it, she will understand. So you got to pick and choose your battles. You can't just say no to everything that they want to do, because then it becomes a recording, and then they're not going to ask you.
And isn't it more likely they're going to soak that in too, because you gave them a reason to go along with it?
Yeah, when you have an open discussion about something, it's better than a yes no thing. That's like for job interviews and things like that. When you interview someone, you don't ask them yes or no questions. So why would you have that kind of communication with your child? You want to
lazy parenting.
I tell people this all the time. I don't remember where I got this, but ask a kid, how was school today? Their answer will be good. What did you do today? Nothing. Like that. That's your communication with your kid. If you don't work to try and come up with a creative way to get them to open up or talk about it. How was your day? It was good. Good is like, that's such a non-answer, So I heard this thing, I can't take credit for it, but I've passed it on to so many parents and friends that I know. I used to play this game with my daughter when she was younger. We call it, and we still do it to this day. She'll bring it up. She loved it. We call it 2 truths and a lie. So I would say, how was your day? Good. Okay, tell me 3 things. 2 of them are true, and 1 of them is a lie, and I have to guess which is the lie. And I could see her thinking and her strategy in coming up with, like, where should I place the lie? Where should I place the truth? How can I trick him? Like, what is the craziest thing that happened to me today that my dad is going to think is a lie? And what is a normal thing that could have happened today that my dad is going to think is the truth? So it really opens up a conversation, and then you make your guess.
And it gets a creative juice flowing.
It definitely does. And then it opens up so much more conversation about, she'll tell me, like, I thought this up. I thought you were going to pick this was the lie because I made this up. Or, she'll say, she used to do this thing where she would take something that happened and just change one small thing about it. Like, I did this, and this friend, and this friend followed me or whatever. And it turned out to be just her and one other friend or something, some minor tweak, but it was definitely like, it took a 13-second, how was your day? Good. What did you do? Nothing. It took that and made it an hour-long conversation. Like, we would run out of time to talk because we had things that we had to do.
Yeah,
what I mean? The exact opposite.
Well, you're connecting. You're using your creative,
and
part of your brain.
I think that's the key. And I don't claim to be any kind of parenting expert, but for
I think you've if your relationship with your daughter is proof of anything. I think it's definitely you've done something right.
I give her mom a lot of credit. I think her mom has done a fantastic job with her. She has her
Dave,
much more.
She's
than
not
I
listening. You don't have to be nice.
I know. That's proof that I'm being honest. That's proof that I'm being honest. But I think that my position has always been like I never felt safe discussing things with my parents. And the one thing, like we learn from our parents, not only like by following the good things that they do, but when we see the things that they do that we don't like, we can learn from that as well. So like we were talking upstairs earlier, like whatever happens, good and bad come out of that. It's all a matter. It's all your choice what you take away from that. You were talking about, the mob and jazz and stuff like that earlier.
Oh yeah. So Thaddeus Russell, yeah, he wrote a book. I think it's called The Renegade History of the United States, and the history of jazz, how it came about, how at one time they didn't let black people learn classical music and like traditional music and stuff like that because that's just not what they did. They're like, oh no, they're not elegant enough to learn it, so they end up basically creating their own type of music, and they would just played what felt good to them and went to, create this amazing style that somebody who probably learned traditional music would never come up with.
Right.
Because it does seem like you somebody from like myself who never really took lessons on any instrument. One thing I was always worried about was adopting somebody else's style. And I felt like people who you'd hear when I was a young kid, I'd hear Eddie Van Halen learn on his own and stuff like that. And that's how he came, had this creative style. And I think there's something to that, but I definitely think it makes it a longer route to learn something.
I'm sure.
Because it's like things that like I could have just learned immediately, somebody would have told me how to do it. I had to fuck around with, but to me, it was always like, well, what's the wrong way of doing something? Like, isn't anything can be music. And I grew up listening to industrial music, which really was the essence of fucking around with sounds. Like electronic music at that time isn't like today where there's a lot, and there's still a lot of industrial now, but like, Nine Inch Nails is the one who really got popular, but the musicians that were underground before Nine Inch Nails and really like were fucking around with sounds and Nine Inch Nails did similar things, but they basically said, well, why does music have to be these traditional instruments of guitar, drums, bass, and vocals? Like, why can't it be this weird sound and make it into a beat, or make this weird sound, or fuck around with distortion? Because that's where he got it from. Like a lot of the stuff that he did with distortion came from the underground industrial scene, and that they would fuck around with a lot of distortion and weird things, and basically questioning the idea of what the fuck is music. Like,
I love Nine Inch Nails, and I think that like the exploring that's done in that music is crazy. Like sometimes I'll listen to it and think like, how did they arrive at? How was that the final product? And I'd love to hear, like, even your opening song is different now than it was when the
because I figured everybody was sick of hearing
but,
the other song.
But it's cool in the sense of like it's the same
Style.
thing, but it's different. You know what I mean? It's an evolution of a sound, and I would love to be in a studio with like Trent Reznor and see how he layers things and does things. But I've always loved like the Nine Inch Nail lyrics, the just
well, when
a lot of that relates
when Johnny Cash does one of your songs before he passes away. He did Hurt.
Yeah, that's a fantastic. That song is just the lyrics of that song.
But it's funny because I had the singer Enter Shikari on recently, and we were talking about writing. And the cool thing about having musicians on is, even though I'm obviously an amateur musician, I still go through a lot of the same processes. I've been in the same mindset. I've kind of it's easier. I feel like I connect with them in a certain way. Like I've had, I remember Casey Burek, who's also a musician from the Siren. I remember talking about music and like, yeah, I do that. And like, even with you know what? I just realized I never finished that jazz story.
I never finished the whole point of learning from your parents to be. Well, that's how it goes.
Where were you going with that?
I just was going to say that you learn by following and by the opposite of following. You know what I mean? Like you learn, like when something good happens, you say, I want to emulate that. When something bad happens, you say, I want to do the opposite of that. And I think what I was saying was like I never felt comfortable. I never really had a conversation with my father as a child. But as we got older, things changed, and we made amends with everything like that. But that's one thing I wanted to be as a father to my child or children was I wanted them to feel safe to come to me and be non-judgmental. And I still to this day, and hopefully it'll continue because she's only 12 now. But from what I understand, the storm is coming. But I just want her to feel comfortable telling me whatever and not react.
Well, and you have a good technique to that, because I remember you saying once how if she says something that you might not necessarily like, or if makes you angry, you will hold that back and not let her know you're angry, so that way it doesn't scare her off from.
Yeah,
that's a great tip. That
safe in expressing herself to you, and I think that's key. And it's funny listening to the Taoist lecture, which I think is one of the greatest things.
How far into it are you?
I'm 8 into it, so I'm about halfway through it.
For people who don't know, Daniele Bignelli's, I'm sure most people who listen know who Daniele Bignelli is, because it seems like a lot of the people I have on and stuff like that is similar to some of the people he have on, and I've had him on and stuff like that. So, but he was one of our early guests on the show, and I've had almost all our early guests back on because just to kind of, one, to say thank you, and two, because I had him on because I was a fan of theirs, and it's awesome to catch up and stuff. And talking about catch up, Adam Scorgi, his film came out today, The Culture High, and he's going to be on a London Real episode, which is releasing Sunday. So definitely check that out. It's available on Vimeo, I think it's called, and iTunes, and it has tons of cool people and whatever. But anyways, back to what I was saying. But we're Daniele Bignelli released it's called
it's the Taoist. He calls it the Taoist lecture series.
Yeah,
and it's phenomenal because it's not only because I feel like, I have I guess I would say a background in Buddhism, and I've read a ton on
Buddha. Was your great grandfather, right?
Yeah. No, actually, it's my brother. We're the same age, Buddha and I. I outlived him, but I've always been fascinated with that kind of that philosophical perspective of things.
I think that it's funny how a lot of people I'm a fan of. I'm a fan of their opinions and perspectives. They all seem to be into that Buddhism and Taoism and stuff like that. And I think there must be something to it. I don't know much about it.
I don't know, how far have you gotten with it?
Not much. And actually, I'm for listeners, so look out for the episode, because the plan is, and I've already talked to Daniele, so he knows that once we finish this lecture, we're going to have him on to talk about it and stuff, and obviously talk about other things, because this show never sticks to one topic ever. But we'll have him on to talk about it and kind of expand on it and stuff like that. So definitely look out for that episode. But it's definitely, he's made Taoism, I think he's exposed it to a lot of people that probably didn't know much about it also. And
I remember it, like I said before, I minored in philosophy in college and kind of got a taste of everything, which kind of is what led me to Buddhism. I was attracted to it. And I love in the Taoist lecture series how he says it's not, you don't choose to be Taoist. You don't choose to follow these ways. It's something that's in you. And I was like, that's an odd thing to say. I didn't really grasp that when he said it. But as I'm listening to all these different things, I really feel like this is not that I'm going to become this, but this is going to become me. You know what I mean? I feel I'm taking a lot away from this in terms of, I'm seeing, like, we had this conversation the last time we were talking about, I think we did. I don't know. I don't remember now, like how many things we talk about here versus upstairs or otherwise, but I like to learn about myself. Like why do I make it? Like you were talking about you and Bruno, how you guys can have the same thing. Like what causes me to think these thoughts and behave this way and act this way.
And it's beyond psychology, because the thing about psychology is that psychology really, I mean, it's almost like it makes things so this is scientific that it takes away from something deeper. And I feel like there is something deeper to it. You know, not that psychology's.
I think psychology is like sports talk, and philosophy is playing the game.
Yeah, no, that's a good way to put it. You should put that on a t-shirt.
I don't think it fit.
But
you can quote me on that in a couple of weeks.
And fuck
mess
it up
but
and not sound nearly as good.
of it.
Yeah, but that's a good way. That's a very good way to put it. Because I've heard people say like psychology is bullshit. Like the like you don't really learn as much about people through psychology versus philosophy, because philosophy doesn't just analyze your thoughts and beliefs and perspectives, but it makes you second guess them all together.
Yeah.
And to me, that's what was always intriguing. That's why it was funny, like when I meet somebody who's not even the littlest a bit intrigued with, and it's the other thing, like, you know, I was telling him how I'm like, everybody, and I can't take credit for this because I think Dan Carlin said it, and of course another quote that I'm probably gonna mess up, but he definitely said something along the lines that I think on a recent Common Sense podcast, his other podcast, not Hardcore History, the other one, and he talked about how, like, you might not know it, but everybody is intrigued with history, and you might not realize, but history is everything that happened before now. And so if you like I was telling my brother, I'm like, so if you like watching old basketball clips, I'm like, well, you like history.
That's
you know?
history, yeah.
I'm like, that's history of basketball. You know, if you like older cars, then you like history. And he made the point, well, he's like, well, what if, you know, the guys who grow up just watching one generation of basketball that was before them, so history to them is not really important, it's just a current history. And I'm just like, yeah, but those guys, I'm like, but so he's like, so what his point was, what, you don't have to research a bunch of old stuff. You just you can be into just the current history, and the old stuff's not really that important. I'm like, yeah, but the guys that you grew up watching, you look up to them, so they influence you. And those guys had guys they grew up and they influenced them. And then the guys they grew up influenced them. So it goes down the line.
Yeah.
So it does pave this trail where, like, history is, you know, if you learn about really old shit, then you realize how you got here. It's almost like, you know, you can either just look at the finish line and be like, this is where we are, this is now. Or you can be like, well, how did we get here? And be intrigued with see how, like, what path we took, you know? And I mean, I always made this point, and I think I've made this point in this podcast numerous of times. If somebody told me that in World War II, if Hitler won, that our perspective on history would be completely different, that we wouldn't be speaking the languages we're speaking today, then how many people can hear that and not be like, holy shit, I want to learn more? Like, the idea that, like, even our history that we learn is influenced by what happened in history.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at it, like, who won the war, who wrote the books, you know, like, most of the time, from political policy to laws, it's all motivated by culture of that time, history, you know, what happened in that point in time in history. So, like, all that is so important to figure out how you got here. And I feel like it's so, I mean, to me, it's like, you know, life's a big puzzle, and, like, everything you learn, it's like one more piece that you're adding that a puzzle. And then as things become a little clearer, I think it's easier to enjoy life. I think it makes more sense. And to me, it's just, isn't that what made us evolve as a species? Like, curiosity, like, and it's funny because I have this theory that, because I've always wondered this, I'm like, why do we have so much access to information, but yet people still say old shit is like the most influential or the best books? Like, you look at, like, Plato's Republic, okay? People today still say it's like one of the best pieces of philosophy ever. And it's like, wait, you know how many philosophers got to read his stuff, read a bunch of other stuff that came after him that was great, and still couldn't write something as good as that?
Yeah.
And you're like, and I'm thinking to myself, like, why does it seem like some of the greatest minds, like, were then, and like, it doesn't seem like there's, not that there's not smart people today, but with the incredibly more access we have to information.
You know what's funny? That's philosophy, though. Like, look at science, how much science and technology has evolved, and even psychology, what we know about the human brain chemically.
But I have a theory.
But what hasn't evolved is philosophy, in the sense that,
oh yeah, absolutely.
But it has, in the sense that, like, all other sciences try to answer questions. Philosophy is the science of asking more questions. So really, the evolution of philosophy is unraveling your own mind in a sense. You know what I mean? You don't get directly from A to B through philosophy. It's like a roundabout route. You know what I mean? If you want to know what causes this condition in your brain, you can read and say this, and this. But if you want to find out how you arrived at a certain way of thinking, there's no steps to it. It's a process, but it's not direct. You know what I mean? Like, it's a personal thing.
Well, I've said that. I've said how it's amazing how like even quotes from a long time ago make just as much sense today as they did then when they were written. So it's like you look at it, like you said, we haven't changed much. What we use as transportation has changed. What we use for communication has changed. The way we dress has changed. The way we might look has changed. But really, a lot of what motivates us, our desires, our wants, our curiosity, a lot of that stuff hasn't changed. So my theory in why I think that a lot of these great books and stuff like that, it seems to be more old stuff than it is today, because I feel like, so you look at one time, like when we were creating tools and stuff like that, and we're creating free time because we were finding easier ways to do things, which gave us more free time. And when we had a free time, what did we do? We would sit there and look at things, and we would think, and we'd be like, we'd look at those stones and be like, that's a pyramid. I can make a pyramid out of these, So it's like they came up with math, and they came up with this. They understood the stars, and they questioned what who they were and what they believe, and how to So it was always like innovation and in a sense, philosophy, and all these things came was coming at a speed, and I think like that's what we did with our free time for a long time. You look at. For a long time, when you had free time, you read a book, you did this, you did that, and now today it seems like when we have free time, we just have so much mindless entertainment where like somebody who could possibly come up with a very intriguing, could be a great author and write something down. We'll never get around to writing it. Why? Yeah. Because they're
distracted.
Constant stimulation, your serotonin levels are you're getting quick satisfaction by playing this game. Your brain satisfies, you're getting the right signals to your brain where you're happy, and it's a quick, and it's like, so it's like I've even found myself even the last year struggling to watch documentaries, which I do all the time, and I struggle to watch documentaries, and it's this goes into another thing. So I don't know if you remember a while ago, I had this guy Relic who did the movie, owned and operated on it was on YouTube. He did like this amazing documentary that he put together in his house by himself, and it was just a documentary I ended up running into online and blew my mind, and I couldn't believe this dude who wasn't like a professional filmmaker.
I remember you talking about that.
And I had him on, and he had a really interesting, and he found all these super interesting, thought-provoking clips that pasted all together to create this really, thought-provoking documentary. It really was a very thought-provoking documentary. And so he had this clip of Ferguson, the guy who has a late-night show, Scottish guy.
All right, yeah.
Craig Ferguson, Irish. I don't know if I think he's Scottish. But either way, so he had this clip of him, and I've never seen this clip before. And I'm not sure if it was a stand-up or if it was him during his show, but he was talking about this really intriguing idea of how he remembers when people used to look up to older people because you were wise, because you had wisdom, because you were well spoken and you had ideas, and you were an author, you just had experiences, and you whatever. And he's like at some point culture changed where now old people are wearing more makeup and dressing differently to look young, and we celebrate the young person instead of celebrating the old person, and we celebrate the person who just wants to party and get drunk, and the person who just is could care less about thinking about anything below the surface, and just wants to look good and whatever, and just and there's not that there's anything wrong with that, but I think that there has been a culture change, and I think there is something to that. I mean, you look at it at the times of Plato and whatever, we don't even have to go back that far, but I'm sure in not that long ago that there were people did look up to because we didn't have TV, we didn't have.
What I think a lot of that comes from is
you look at authors and like not to cut you off, but before I lose this thought, like you look at authors and stuff like that. Like a lot of times when you read a book that was influential, you always assume it was an older person. So you weren't really celebrating young people. Young people didn't. So now today it's like we're so. Everybody who's famous is young, and it's like, and usually famous for not doing anything great, for nonsense. So like, I wonder if that culture change has been because of that, or because of that culture change, it's caused this thing where like now less people care about being wise or being, I hate to use the term well-read because I'm not even well-read, but the idea of at least just looking, willing to look inside themselves or I don't even know how to put it, but somebody, because there's I don't know how to the title I should use for like the two type of people, but we know they exist. The ones who you meet and you're like, wow, this person has well thought out ideas and opinions, and you can tell he's analyzed some shit, and then you have the person who's like, No, what you see is what you get, and that's it. And I think there's more of the second person than there is the first person.
How about awake and distracted?
Yeah.
You know, but I think a lot of that comes from the technology that we have now, and in two ways. One, younger people know how to exploit themselves and become popular because of their.
All you need is a sex tape.
I just saw something on Outside Magazine about this girl. I don't remember her name. I don't know where she's from, but she was probably in her 20s, and she's become some kind of yoga expert. And as I read the article, she's attractive, she's young, she takes pictures of herself in yoga poses, like traveling the world, and has like 1 million plus followers on whatever social media she has. Now, I'm not going to
I'm sure she's
judge
a nice
her.
lady.
I'm not going to judge her, but I'm sure there is some 90-year-old decrepit man somewhere in India with no technology that knows more about yoga than this girl ever will. But because of her ability to exploit herself through social media, she's like this guru. And I think the other thing comes from the lack of respect that older people get from younger people comes from their inability to navigate technology. Like,
They look like dumb monkeys.
you have, like I'm older. My mother's old, and she I know she doesn't listen to the show. She doesn't give but she just got an iPad and Wi-Fi in the house, and I'm trying to teach her how to use that stuff. And it dawned on me, like, it was very difficult to teach. It's difficult to teach an older person how to use this kind of stuff. So I think that in the sense of technology, and what's so dominant in technology is cell phones and social media, older people don't know how to navigate that. So younger people just dismiss them and think like, well, you're not posting pictures on Instagram, so therefore where's your contribution? Well, sit down and talk to this person for an half hour and let them tell you about this or that in their lives. The way that older people communicate their knowledge doesn't fit technology. So in this world where people are looking things up on their phone and Facebooking and tweeting and all that kind of stuff, like, the older people aren't part of that realm and don't know how to use that. So they're being dismissed by younger people. So I think that's where a lot of the wisdom is being lost. Like, nobody's going to sit down and talk with their grandparents without doing yeah grandpa, that's great, you fought in the war, yeah Korea, yeah, that's where that guy with the funny haircut is, look at this meme, that's where it comes from. I think
it's funny because I just saw a similar video of this I think it was Vice that had a video on this woman who was a teacher and then quit teaching because she was making so much money on her twerking videos. And she was like one of the most famous twerkers like in the world, and she does all these videos twerking. And I mean, she gets called.
There's money in twerking.
Yeah, because she gets called to like meet for music videos, for like parties. Like,
we need a twerker in this video
because she gets all these hits on YouTube. So it's like, oh, you got the twerking girl at your party, whatever. I don't know how she makes money, but she does, and she quit teaching because of it. So that's a perfect example of it. And the other thing, when you're talking about old people, I just was thinking about that commercial of that woman who's like. That older woman who's breaking candy, and you're like, what are you doing? I'm playing Candy Crush. You
know what? Does your dad have a smartphone?
No.
But can he make wine?
Yeah.
Like, he makes great wine, like unbelievable wine, and you can sit and talk to your dad for hours about different things he's done in his lifetime to make wine. And, this year I did this, and last year I did that. It was too much that, like, you can talk to him for hours about that.
You know what's funny? How much, and I've heard Stefan Molyneux, this guy who I don't really agree with, barely ever of the time, but he made this very interesting argument that got him a lot of shit, and this idea of how much is the fact that people are celebrating nonsense like that is he made the argument that what if he thinks women, we talked about this before about Thaddeus Russell and the college that he works at, and this idea of this kid who was a jock and played sports and a good looking guy, this and that. end up hooking up with this girl who was also in college, same age, I think either same age or roughly the same age. They both were in college, so roughly the same age. And she wrote a text message to her friend saying saying that she's gonna meet up with this guy and hook up with him. She also text messaged the kid about, oh, do you have a condom? He said yeah. So he's like, okay, I'll be right over. And then they got drunk and they end up. She ends up saying, oh, I think he raped me because I was drunk. And then all these feminists, or some of the professors there, female professors, were like, well, he raped her. And it's a perfect psychology for a rapist, or perfect type of thinking for a rapist, because he's a jock, so he feels privileged and this and that and all this stuff. And so it's an interesting thing, because then you said, oh, well, that is, how can that be rape? But most of the time when you're in college, if you're a jock and you come from a privileged family, chances are, you're going to have girls, left and right. You're not going to, and same thing we talk about athletes. I remember when
I didn't say, how can that be rape? I said that, how can that.
No, well, you said in a joking manner.
No. Rape is not a joke.
No. But I'm saying you said something. Okay, I might have fucked that up.
You had said that. See,
stop trying to cover your ass.
No. This is important because what you had said was that this guy coming from privilege and being an athlete is the prototype for a rapist. And I said that, like, as a girl, that those are attractive qualities to have. So that's
what I meant.
That's what I meant.
Yeah, no, that's what I meant that you meant. But
right.
But yeah, so that's an interesting thing, because so this goes back to the other thing where, like, Stefan Malhu's a point of view where he has this idea that those are important qualities to women, and he makes the debate that the reason why there's so many more guys who are interested in sports than there are guys interested in wisdom and stuff like that is because women want to get with guys who have these type of things and not so much these type of things. So if you're a well thought out dude and you have good perspectives and you can hold a conversation well and you seem interesting, that might not necessarily be the traits that a woman's looking for.
But who knows? That's what the media and commercials tell us. You know what I mean? Who knows?
Who knows where the root of it is?
Who knows what women are interested in?
Well, I think that there is some truth to the fact that women are, and it's the same thing. I mean, guys have shallow interest in women. I mean, there's guys who just look at, does she have tits and ass? Then I'm interested. So it's not like, and we don't necessarily are turned on by women. Oh, she's really well spoken, so that's my type. No, but that's usually a plus, but that's not usually what gets our attention. So I think that, and it does go to a deeper issue or a deeper understanding of what causes us to think like this. Is it our lack of control of this primitive desire that we still have that kind of attracts us just to attractive people? Because for the longest time we're hardwired to be, I want to have a strong family. I want to have good genes in the family. So I'm attracted to somebody who is good looking, and because they seem like they're healthy and strong genes. And it could be that. Yeah. I think there could be something to that. And then it also, I think, is a combination of what we talked about before, culture, young people and that type of culture being celebrated. So somebody who looks like they just, we don't look at somebody, like you said, who is wise and wisdom and been through some shit and is well spoken as any trait that, like, people want. People want to have the nice car. People want to have, these are the things we think attract opposite sex. We don't think, oh, I should be well read because it's going to get me laid. No, it's like, I want to play guitar because it's going to get me laid. I want to be a star athlete because it's going to get me laid. So so all these things I think are a big part of it, but it definitely, it's interesting because it does seem insane that we have so much access to information, but yet there's still so many dumb people out there. I mean, like the idea that, like, if the Egyptians had this type of access to information, they understood the stars, they understood, math, and all these things. And it just like, with like nothing but like their thoughts and like their surroundings.
They needed that though to survive. They needed that to know, to
well, they didn't need the pyramids to survive.
Forecast seasons. No, but I mean the knowledge of the stars. I mean, that's
That was navigation.
That's always, that's always been crucial for survival. Now my phone can tell me how to get anywhere I need to go.
Which convenience has made us dumber in some sense, because
it's made us useless, really, when you think about it. I mean, if something were to happen, like look at what we go into panic when we lose power. Like, how am I going to charge my phone? Like, look at people when their phone is dying. They're like heroin addicts trying to get a fix. Like, oh my God, my phone is dying. What am I going to do? Like, I can't talk to my friends. I can't figure anything out without my phone. So I think we've come to depend on that.
You ever forget your phone? Like this, you panic, then you're like, you're content with it. Then you realize, like, holy shit, people went a long time without phones, and it's not, you always just think like the worst, like something's going to happen. I'm not going to have my phone on you. It's like, fuck, man, you've had your phone every day of your life, and nothing's happened.
When I first got this phone, I really became like, it was constantly on me because of work. But now I've been like leaving it in my car, leaving it on my desk, like really like trying to leave it behind a lot lately, because I find that it's such a distracting thing sometimes, like to focus on whatever it is I'm going to do. And people say, like, don't keep your phone by your bed and things like that. Like, I'll shut my phone down. Like, I've been listening to the Taoist lectures, and phone is off, like out of the room, ringer off.
Isn't that another weird thing? Like, how much fucking radiation and stuff is in the air? Or not radiation, but like, you look at
frequencies.
Yeah. Like, so we sit in a house, or you lay in a bed, and that's, it sits in a house that's full of Wi-Fi and radio signals, and every time you get a notification, there's something in the air that it's getting. Yeah. So we're constantly around shit. It's like, we don't even know the long-term effects of this yet.
What scares me is I'll be at work, before I get a text, I'll have my phone plugged in on my desk. My computer will start to sizzle and make this sizzling sound. And I'm like, oh, here comes a text. And sure enough, like, my phone will ring, or I'll get a text. I'm like, man, that's like, I'm in like a brick building.
I'm actually surprised office. These microphones right now aren't doing it. Because for a while I would have to turn my phone off or turn the Wi-Fi off, because if I have my phone too close to this microphone, for some reason, every time something happens to my phone, like you said, this microphone will pick it up. And so it's like, just because we don't see it, it's like we don't realize, like,
and it's like going through us, like it's going through us. Like, you can put your phone between your knees, and just so like, how is it getting there?
Well, that's another thing. See, and this reminds me of, so I had Cara Santa Maria on not too long ago, and she's basically a science nerd. She I mean, I'm not making fun of her. That's actually what she calls herself. Her podcast is called Talk Nerdy. So, and obviously the nerd thing has been embraced, I think, now, which is good. I think that the fact that there's a culture that embraces.
Yeah, that's what you were just saying, though, about how everyone wants to be a jock and guitar player.
Which I think will end up getting trendy, and people will pretend they're nerds, not really be nerds. So what you see already, people wearing the glasses, and like, I'm like, is he really like a nerd, or is he just trying to pretend he is? But
was I talking to you, or was it somebody else? We were talking about the beards and flannel. Was that a different conversation? How nowadays, like, guys, the guys that have beards and flannel, like back in the day, hipsters wear the flannel shirts. I think we talked beards
because my dad
back in the day used to swing axes and chop friggin' trees.
Because my dad wears plaid. Like, my dad wears plaid his whole life. He's been wearing plaid button-ups. He wears them to work. He does it while he's doing shit around the house. And like, now it's gotten back. And I remember looking at him when I was growing up, like, like that's ugly, I'm like, I'd never wear that out. And now, like, I'm paying more for like the same style of shirt that he's wearing,
because it's in style.
But isn't that an interesting thing about fashion? Like, you look at it, if you want to talk about, so like, this is something I've thought about, like, how little we understand about what makes us like and want things. Because fashion's a perfect example of our lack of understanding, or us thinking we actually like something because of some pure reason that we actually like it, and not knowing there's other outside influences. Because I remember growing up, and like, I remember when I was growing up, and bell bottoms were back in again, right? And everybody wore like, just wider pants at the bottom. And then I remember when skinny jeans started getting back, right? Like, I remember when people were in skinny jeans while bell bottoms were in, and people were looking at them and be like, oh, like, what? I don't know, that they're all skinny, and I can't wear pants like that. They're too tight, and it's all tight all the way down. I like the way bell bottoms look on my sneakers and heels, and and it just like, so the wider look was in, and then skinny jeans, and now we look at like bell bottoms the same way again, or like, for example, when skinny jeans first got popular, it was like just usually jeans, and now colors got in, and the first time colors, you start seeing people wear colors, you're like, ugh, and then all of a sudden it got accepted where like now everybody wants a pair. So my point of this is it's amazing how one thing, the exact same thing, like years later, mentally tells you, your brain tells you I like this.
Yeah.
But and then the exact same thing like years before, you look at it and say, no, it doesn't attract me whatsoever. And it's like, what, like it shows how little we understand of what motivates us, and how we have all these outside things that are influencing what. Like I remember having a conversation once with my girlfriend, and like when it kind of went over her head because I forget what the conversation was, but I was like, yeah, but I'm not sure that's exactly why you're doing it. And she's like, no, it is. I know I did it. I'm like, well, you don't really know it, and I'm like, we have a lot of outside influences that we. And I was trying to explain to her, I'm like, sometimes we buy a car because we think we really like that car, but in the back of our head, it's because we know this car is going to help us pick up some girls, or it's going to make people think like, yeah, I'm successful, I'm doing good. It's like we do have these outside influences, and so much of that we don't understand. And I think that goes back to like the philosophy conversation, where like those type of things that you analyze is important, because you try to figure out what really motivates me, or what is really motivating me, and why do I want, and then you try to get to the root of am I doing this for me, or am I doing this? Well, I think I've had this conversation with you, and I've had this same conversation yesterday at the gym with some older guys who work out at the gym, and we're talking about how like when we first started exercising, how I'm like, dude, I'll be completely honest. The only reason I ever started going to the gym is because I wanted to feel better about myself looking wise. Like I didn't care about health. I'm like, I did shit to my body that probably
wait till you're my age.
Yeah, well, I'm sure
it all change. Everything changes, man. For me, it's about just being like living a good life and living another day. Like I see people my age that are tremendously overweight, that are riding the rascal around in grocery stores. People younger than me that are doing that. I'm like, man, I know
this is gonna piss people off, but dude, fat people who don't have any type of medical issue that causes them to be fat are just lazy bastards. And it pisses me off so bad when people call it a disease. It's a lack of self-control, if you ask me. To think that we don't all have the same desires to eat. Like when I see pizza, I want to eat it every fucking time I smell pizza. I want to eat pizza, but I don't because I know
just saying pizza now makes me want pizza right now.
So you know what really drives me nuts? It's yesterday we for people who don't know, I'm sure I've mentioned it in the show, but I work construction. So yesterday it was rained, so we end up, short day, driving to the gym. I figured get to the gym early, this and that. There's this guy in a wheelchair pushing himself, not an electric wheelchair, pushing himself in the rain with a bag attached. And
how can you not go to the gym after seeing something like that?
Well, it's not. But it's not even just that. I was already on my way to the gym. But the thing that pisses me off about seeing stuff like that is the fact that I know that there's somebody who could walk, who just decided not to, and has an electric wheelchair. But whatever this guy's circumstances, I'm not sure. But this guy is pushing himself and really can't walk, and only wish he had the ability, I'm sure, to even exercise and be in shape and use his health that he had and stuff like that. So like I remember I was working in Holyoke once, just local city Holyoke for people who are out of state, and there's this blind guy that would walk by almost every day down this really busy road, and he would stop and talk to me, and obviously like
of course he didn't know it was you each time.
And
nice to meet you.
I think it's safe to say he doesn't listen to podcasts either, so we can talk about it. But so this blind guy, and he would walk down the road completely blind with a stick, looking around. I'm like, I talked to him, and then he's talking about, like, he knows shit about the construction jobs. Like, oh, you guys are up a little further up the street now. You guys making progress.
He's got to know where the holes are.
Yeah, well, that's true too. And I'm just like, I'm thinking to myself, holy shit, this, like, the things we take for granted, and the fact that this guy really shouldn't be walking, and because it's dangerous, and chooses to, and yet there's other people who have the ability to walk and don't. Like, or when anytime I see somebody who has, like, there's this guy who I think we were working in Springfield, who he would walk by all the time, had like something wrong with his leg, where like it looked like it was twisted or something like that. Like he just didn't walk, like his foot was twisted, like, so every step he took was like, looked like it was a struggle. Mm-hmm. So the basic task of walking to the next room is a struggle for this guy. The basic task of doing anything is, and this guy I don't know if he had a car or not, but he walked everywhere.
Yeah.
And just like, it broke my heart to watch this guy walk every day, and then like know that there's some person who just is. I saw this person at
ate
Big
their
Y.
way into a handicap placard.
Yeah, I saw this guy, this woman at Big Y, and it pissed me off. And I remember I was there, and I just looked at this. I'm like, this shit. Like, I'm like, why is this making me so mad? Like, this woman walks in, bigger woman, right? Walks in completely fine, but she's a bigger woman. Gets one of those, remote control carts. Hops in it and is going around Big Y. I'm like, you have legs, you look fine, you're not limping, you're just being lazy. And it's that type of shortcuts that you're taking is why you're going to continue to get fat, and eventually we're going to call it a disease. And then you're going to be, I know this fat shaming thing, but it's like, there is a difference between somebody who has a disability, who has some type of medical issue where their metabolism is really slow or whatever. But those people are rare. Are not as many as I believe the ones that we call disease. And how much of it is a lack of self-control? That's no different than calling somebody who cheats on this girlfriend all the time. Like, so we should look at that too. Like, if you're cheating all the time, it's the same type of thing. You have these desires you can't control. We should feel bad for them. We shouldn't. Tiger Woods don't be bad at Tiger Woods. He was just, and I'm not.
Just has a big sexual appetite.
Yeah, exactly. Which is, I agree with. But my point is that we don't look at both at the same light.
You're right. Because you know why? Because so many people are out of control. It's really out of control. I was talking to, I forgot who I was talking to the other day, but my grandfather, I remember him as a kid thinking he was heavy. And by today's standards, like, he's not even close to heavy. You know what I mean? He was a healthy guy, but things have changed so much in society, and they're making everything bigger coffins, bigger seating. Everything is just,
the bigger coffins.
We're just growing. It's just crazy, but it's so unhealthy. Like, I've always been motivated to be healthy, and I'm grateful that I'm that way. Like, I'm grateful that I can get out and do things, I'll always be the active one, and I'm very lucky that I haven't had any serious injuries or anything like that. And I had a very bizarre medical scare this summer that shocked the hell out of me. So I don't think I took my health for granted before, but now I'm really motivated to stay healthy because of what happened. It would turn out to be nothing, but it was enough to make me really work hard to maintain what I have as long as I can. It's crazy that people can't get out of their car and walk into the grocery store without losing their breath, or climb a set of stairs. I'm sympathetic to a degree, because I'm grateful that I'm not that way, and whatever it is that led that person to that physical condition, I'm sorry. I could see myself going down that road at a point in my life, probably, when I was younger and caught up in work and doing all those things that distract you from being healthy. But luckily I snapped out of it, and I feel good. I could drop dead tomorrow. I don't know, but it's not from a lack of effort on my part.
Well, I think being active is important too, because I think the lifestyle we live today of not doing a lot of, or some people not doing a lot of moving and using their body for what it's designed to do is very unnatural. And then you get this build up tension, and you need to release it somewhere. I feel like when you go to the gym, or even, it's weird because music and arts kind of have the same effect on me. If I, and I guess that's one's a mental therapy, the other one's more like a physical therapy. But it seems like when you get, I guess I don't even. It's weird. They do have the same effect, but they don't even seem like I can't even really understand why. But because one, I understand the physical thing is that you have this build up tension. We're designed to move. We're designed to, and that's why sometimes you hear people say, well, if the more you move, the more energy you have. That's because your body's doing what it wants to do. It's
right.
It's no different than a car that's designed to move. And then if you garage it, it seems like it makes sense. If you garage it, it'll last longer. Well, no, actually, I know anybody who has cars will tell you, if you garage a car for a year and try to start it, tons of things are going to go wrong. Why? That car was designed to move. It was designed to be lubricated and to have, to heat up and cool down and whatever. So it's very similar. But it's weird because arts can be a good alternative too, where, you kind of, I guess, tap into some inner emotions and get that out and stuff. But the point is that I think people need some sense of relieving themselves of some tension, even either mental or physical. And I think both are really important. And I think there's people who just don't have any hobbies, like don't have, like I say this to people all the time. Like, I'm like, you should really, like, I kind of feel like an asshole at times, but I'm like, cause I'm like, what's a nice way of saying like, hey, having a hobby is a good thing in the long run. Like, it'll give you a reason to use that part of your brain that focuses on creativity and imagination and all this stuff and all these other things. So just like, how do you tell somebody that without sounding like an asshole? Like, you need a hobby, do something with yourself, you lazy bastard, but it's like, but even if, like, cause this, for example, this podcast is a hobby, it's something that, I hope keeps growing but at the end of the day, I do it because I do get a sense of relief doing this, because so much of our day is focused around doing shit we have to do, like chores and things that are responsibilities, that how many times are you doing something like for the simple sake of it's enjoyable? Like,
right. You're right.
And not just that. So now you get something like music or arts or poetry or going to the gym. Now it's enjoyable, but it's also, you get something from it. You either get, you get healthier, like by exercising, and physically, if you feel better, usually mentally you feel better, and vice versa. And in the other sense, you also get something from it because if you work on arts and stuff like that, usually you're a deeper thinker. So
I think a lot. I think a lot of what motivates us, and this is going back to that whole self-discovery thing, is emotions. Is dealing with our emotions and processing our emotions in a healthy way. And I think that if you're mad, you can, lose your mind, get a gun, and shoot up your office building because you just haven't dealt with a lifetime worth of emotions. Or you can have an outlet like going to the gym. I think a lot of people that end up heavy eat their emotions. They don't feel emotions. They don't allow themselves to be sad or upset or angry. They hold that in, and the way they deal with their emotions is through eating. I think that's a common thing. So I think that the overweight issue comes from there's a physical aspect of it.
Oh, you came back to overweight then?
Yeah. And I think there's a physical aspect of it, and I think there's an emotional aspect of it.
I agree.
Of everything we do.
I agree.
We need to take care of ourselves physically, but we also need to take care of ourselves emotionally, because I can talk myself in or out of going to the gym. I can talk myself in or out of any emotion. And I was thinking about, like, I spend a good amount of time alone, and I don't feel lonely. Alone is a fact. That's an actual thing. When you are alone, that's a distinct observation. That's a measurable thing. There is nobody in this room, therefore I am alone. Loneliness, that's an emotion. That's a feeling.
Yeah, they are two different things.
You can be alone and not be lonely. And I think that not feel like, I also think that a lot of emotions that we go through are by choice. So if I'm alone and I sit there and dwell on the fact that I'm alone at this moment and tell myself that I'm lonely, then that's a negative emotion. And people can go to the cupboards and fill that loneliness void, not fill being alone, but fill that feeling of loneliness with Hostess cupcakes or something like that. You know what I mean? So I think that...
Well, you can talk yourself in, you definitely, because for example, I talk myself into an anxiety attack before most of these podcasts. And actually, this is one of the most enjoyable ones in a while, because this is the first time I actually I think it being a Friday, I'm probably just so relaxed, not thinking about work and stuff like that, and don't have to rush into a podcast and whatever. And but I absolutely will overthink things, and so it's like, even though you're right, like, okay, you do it to yourself, but what's causing me to do that? Like,
I think anxiety has a negative connotation to it more than being overweight. Like, if you have anxiety, people look at it as like, oh, we got to treat that with medication. Anxiety, in a sense, is a physical defense mechanism to help you deal with things. And maybe the level of anxiety, well, when you think about setting up a podcast with a guest, other than me, who calms you down and makes things easy, other than getting me causing you anxiety, But when you think of all the things that you have to manage doing a podcast, without anxiety, you probably wouldn't be as sharp. So
I don't know about that because
worrying about things that you shouldn't.
I've had some shitty shows where I haven't been able to calm myself down, and I haven't, there's parts of it, and this is the thing. It's like this mental struggle and battle I have within my own brain, where like I will calm myself down, and then I'll be so worried about that anxiety coming back that I'll get anxiety about worrying about anxiety.
Yeah.
And it's like this roller coaster of like nonsense. And it's just, but this goes back to like, so choice. It's like, okay, some people are, because it's funny because I have like I'm still up in the air about the idea of, does somebody choose to look at things negatively and positively, or has life situations, life experiences affected the way they looked at things? So so is it more a choice, or is it more like your experiences? And this goes, I don't know, have you heard the conversation about Sam Harris and the idea of free will doesn't exist? This idea that like he has this whole theory, and it's kind of a silly theory because I think it's kind of a pointless theory. I think in a way he's right, but I think it's kind of pointless, and it doesn't really to focus so much on such a silly theory that really doesn't, you get nothing from. And this goes back to what Daniele says all the time. Like, what's information if it doesn't relate to your life, if it doesn't help you understand things or make you in any way give you a positive reason to want to know this information, then what the hell's the point of it? And this is one of those things where he like is an intellect who came up with this idea of free will and the fact that there's no such thing as free will. And he says that all your life experiences, everything from like what you ate, what you saw,
I've heard this
everything,
kind of thing before.
Yeah, everything you take in will affect the decision you make. In other words, you don't ever get to a road and say, right now I'm completely free to pick left or right, because all your life experiences before and everything you took in affects the reason why you think you're randomly taking that left. So in other words, everything it happens because the last thing happened.
Yeah.
So you don't ever choose anything.
That's so ridiculous.
I thank you, because the thing is that in a way he's right, but what does that mean then? Like you're absolutely.
So basically, the universe is in motion, and nothing can stop it or deviate.
Well, no, it's not that you can't stop it, but
shit happens, it doesn't, man. Like seriously, I think once you realize like shit just happens sometimes, and that's like the randomness of life that we try to assign meaning to. Yeah, but it's impossible.
Okay, so let me be the devil's advocate. What is random if he's kind of right where everything happens? Everything that happens. Listen, I'm in this podcast right now with you because
here's how I dismiss that is because if my life is on this track, I don't know anything about you, but my life is on this track. You don't know anything about me, and your life is on that track. And somehow I crash my car into you. The thing that led my life to do something reckless had nothing to do with you. Like if some guy loses his mind and shoots a classroom full of 5-year-olds.
Yeah, but you're talking about he's talking about free will. So he's talking about the choices you make, not. You're right. Something can happen. So that person's choice.
So that 5-year-old child's choice to go to school and walk down that hallway caused their death. That's ridiculous.
No, but that has nothing to do with free will, because just because she went to a school that like that
free will was snuffed out by some other asshole's free will to kill that person.
Yeah, but
that's ridiculous.
No, but
we have no control over this stuff in the sense
but that's like saying, okay, so I have, my life experiences have, brought me to this spot, and then this person's life experiences brought them to this spot, which happened to take him to the edge where he ends up losing his mind and shooting everybody, including me. Like, there was still, in his philosophy, in his perspective, there's still no free will, because his life experiences, how he got to this spot was because of past experiences, and which affected his, because he's some type of scientist, so he sees things very much as like different chemicals in your brain, changing with life experiences, with intake of different foods and whatever, all these things. So it is a nonsense debate, but it's a nonsense debate because the idea of even bringing it up almost provokes people to say, hey, because somebody who doesn't really question it, and maybe is a big Sam Harris fan, might be like, I have no control over my destiny. In other words, you're changing their mind from going down this route to that route, which if he doesn't believe in free will, and if he thinks intake is what's causing you to make the next decision, which means you're not actually free to make that decision in that moment, it's something else that influences it, then he's actually provoking shitty decisions, because now you're provoking people to think, holy shit, I don't have any control over my life, and now what's the point of me making these positive decisions when everything's almost believing in this fate type of idea.
But there's so many things that influence our daily lives that there's
and he's not saying, he's not restricting it to only one thing. He's saying that all those influences is what causes you to
that's the randomness of life.
But he doesn't think it's random, because what's random about this happened, which influenced this and influenced that, and then it brought you here. So it's not.
I'll tell you what's random. If that's the case, then he should be able to tell me where I'm going to be in 10 years.
No, because he doesn't know your life experiences.
Well, he should be able to analyze that. If that's the case, if we have no free will, we should be able to simulate a human life based on the information that we have available.
Maybe he could.
And you know who does that? Those asshole sportscasters that tell you
who are wrong most of the time.
By statistics, this is what's going to happen.
Yeah, but he's not saying he can tell the future. The idea is that
if we have no free will,
he's saying there's no such thing as pick a color. I give you like 5 seconds to pick a color. Pick any color you want. You have completely free will. The color you will pick, there will be a reason why you pick that color.
So if that's the case, then you should be able to simulate a life. You should be able to simulate that and know everything about somebody and be able to predict what their choice is going to be.
Well, that would be very hard, because this person's choices might end up crossing paths with this person's life, which
so
end up affecting that person's choices.
If this guy were to choose, like, how about your son, your unborn son? Okay, the second your son is born, he can monitor every influence that happens to your child's life, and at what point we'll be able to predict exactly what's going to happen.
In some sense, they're okay.
Never, because someone else's kid could mow him down.
Yes, but that's the point, and that other kid becomes just one of many influences that influences that kid's decision.
But your son will not have made a decision to have that happen.
No, but the point is, it's not. That's the whole point.
This is a ridiculous conversation.
But the point is, you don't make a decision. The point is, you're right. There is no free will.
That's called randomness. There's randomness.
But he's saying
in life.
There isn't randomness, because everybody's path, if they do cross paths and end up leading you to something else, that's just one of many decisions.
If that's not random, then he should be able to.
No, because that person crossing paths with you wouldn't be random, because a bunch of things happen to get them there. And then how they affect you isn't random, because now that person, you got here and they got here, you crossed paths, so it wasn't random.
How much regret, not regret, that's kind of a strong word, but how many things have you done that you wish you hadn't done, or how many things have you not done that you wish you did? That's free will.
Yeah, but no, because what he's saying is that...
Because if you look back...
Because the reason why you even regret those things are because you had good parents who taught you morals.
I'm not saying a bad thing. Like, maybe there was a decision. Maybe you were in a situation where, like, had you said something...
No, but it doesn't matter. Good thing or bad thing. Either way, the way you look at things was influenced by past experiences. Your perspective, you've said, and I, everything's perspective. Like, your perspectives were influenced by past experiences that help mold your perspective. Perfect example, like me and my brother. Perfect example of, and I think they've done studies with twins, like about nature versus nurture thing, because it's no better experience than twins, because you have two almost identical,
two
and then two different experiences, and it shows that most of it is all your environment and your life experiences and stuff like that. So even the way you look at things, the way you decide things, all these things are influenced by something you experienced, something that affected some happy moment that affected some happy chemical in your brain, and that that, and then so it's just like so he looks at everything as a very chemical thing. My point with all this isn't that can it be debated or not, because he's a very smart guy and he could probably debate till the end of time with the best of them. And he got in a debate with Joe Rogan last time he was on the podcast, because Joe Rogan very much kind of thinks of the whole thing, but he was debating. My whole thing was like, why are you even debating it, Joe? Because the whole point of like asking these bigger questions is in hope to have a better understanding of ourselves or something. This question is almost one of the most pointless of all questions, because it doesn't help anything. And the only thing that could really come out of it is somebody who has a lack of understanding of it takes his word for it and well, not takes his word for it, but takes this information and uses it in a bad way, where you almost say you start believing in this fate type thing, where it's like, I have no control of my destiny, because this is, this will lead to that, and then
that's a common thing in Buddhism, where
him saying this will be one of the many influencing experiences, but it'll be a negative influencing experience, which means he's kind of being a shithead, even sparking this conversation, and really being like just pushing it and sparking this conversation like it's an important conversation. It's like, and it's not important because you get nothing from it.
You're right. It is ridiculous. But like what, like we're gonna eat after this. Where are we gonna eat? I don't really even know right now, to be honest with you.
But that decision you're gonna make, or I'm gonna make, is gonna be influenced by places we ate, places we ate recently.
But it's gonna
suggestions.
It's gonna have my influence and your influence. So how is that not free will?
But it's not, because we're both influencing each other, and our decisions were influenced by other things and people.
Ultimately, we are going to come to a decision on where we're going to go.
Yeah, which will be influenced by other things,
but
knowingly or unknowingly.
Right, but that still gives us free will. Just because you're basing a decision you make on
because the idea
past,
of free will is the idea that
we're still ultimately going to choose where we want to go.
Yeah, but what he's saying is that the idea of free will is that you're doing it without it being, and then this is where his philosophy does get tainted, because it's like, so you're doing it without, but of course everything you do is influenced by something.
Of course it is.
So that his debate,
you base it on information that you have, and
so his debate really is like, I mean, it's ridiculous in so many ways. And you're making another a perfect example of how ridiculous, because really you're just saying like, of course people take in information, and the way we progress, I mean, the way people, what separates an intelligent person and a dumb person is, what's that quote? A dumb person learns from their mistakes. A smart person learns from somebody else's mistakes. It's the idea that you can take in information and use it to mold your decision making, and
it's still making a decision. Like if I want to burn my hand, I know exactly where to touch a stove to make that happen.
You know what's funny? If Sam Harris was a pot smoker, I'd be like, that's why he came up with this debate, because he was so high one night.
Maybe he is. I don't know.
But he's not, and he's like anti like psychedelics and stuff. I'm pretty sure he is. And
it sounds like he's looking for an answer. And guess what?
Well, this is why, like I have a issue with anybody who becomes too big of a fan of somebody, because a lot of Sam Harris fans like agree with his logic because they're a fan of him being this atheist, and as people know, I'm an atheist. You're a little more spiritual than I am, but I still can filter out the bullshit. Like I'm not going to just agree with everything somebody says because I'm a fan of his, or I'm a fan of this, and I think that that's important. Like you can disagree with people just because you're a fan of something they do doesn't mean you have to be. But I feel like a lot of people who, if they didn't know Sam Harris and heard this idea, would be like, that's complete bogus. It's like ridiculous. Yeah. But because it comes from him and he's a respected intellect and this and that, and there's another perfect example of how things affect your decision making. Now, my decision on this theory is influenced by who this person is, and I think there's a psychological word for that. I think, right, just like what it is affecting your perspective on it.
Influence.
Yeah, maybe, but no. There's I think there's something else that I was looking for that I'm not going to come up with right now. But either way, like, so that obviously, who he is and him being a respected author is influencing people's opinion on this silly theory and debate.
Well, what about all the ripple effect fans that are listening to this now? You're influencing them into thinking that Sam Harris is silly.
Well, I think my passion for why this debate is so ridiculous is because it almost does affect. Oh, okay, you know what? And actually, his theory, hopefully, if correct or incorrect, is a positive thing to the ripple effect. Because if it's incorrect, I'm saying that.
Well, it's like, think about this though. Like you saying this is bad is like it's like you professing atheism. Like, well, if someone's belief in God makes them a good person and you kill God, then what's the point if there's no God? They have to restructure their thought, or they're just going to become some ridiculous crime.
Wait, say that again. I got lost. What?
Well, you're calling this theory ridiculous, okay? Yeah. It's the same as saying, like, and you're saying that if somebody hears this, it's going to affect their behavior. And they're going to say, well, if I have no decision, then I'm just going to do whatever because it's out of my control.
Yeah, I think
So now think of someone that's brought up as a devout religious person who feels that God is watching them and they're going to behave a certain way because God is watching them. And you're telling them, no, there's no such thing as God. By killing God to this person, they are now not being watched. So they have taken all the power of doing right and wrong from themselves and transposed it onto God. Now you kill God. They don't have an inner
a moral compass.
Yeah, because you just killed it.
That's a lot of pressure on me.
Yeah.
But so you think that the debate could affect religious people or this conversation could affect
every conversation affects everything, Rick, because we have no free will.
Yeah, well, I understand what he like. So he has a very, I mean, if you only understand free will in the way that he understands it, and I guess I think that's where, like,
I'm sure he's right.
I don't think he is, but
I'm sure he's right the way
even
that
if he is
argued
right, yeah.
this thing. And you know what I mean? That's the intellect thing.
Well, he is right in the way he argues it, but this goes back to being good at arguing and doesn't necessarily mean you're right. And it's funny because like, isn't that what like intelligent people do? They can kind of say, even though you're making a good debate, I don't agree with you. And it's like, what's causing us to understand that?
That's what, you know what? Flip right back to the Taoist lecture and Bolelli and the way I enjoy the lecture because of the content, but also the way he delivers it is fantastic. Like his grasp of it and the way he delivers it. And there's a thing where he's talking about professors, like when a professor introduces themselves as, I am Professor so-and-so, you must respect me. Like he totally dismisses that. Like I love the way he not only delivers this message, but he really, he lives it. You know what I mean? He lives it.
He's a cool dude, man.
He really is. He really is.
His perspective on things, and it's cool because when I found out that Thaddeus Russell and Daniele Bagnelli were the guy that I told you wrote that book that I've been talking about, he when I heard that they were friends, and they do a really interesting podcast together on the Drunken Taoist when they talk about being professors and how they're both completely different than all the other professors, and how it's just when he was getting a job somewhere, Thaddeus Russell, he got in front of a bunch of the teachers and stuff like that, and like basically talked about what he was going to teach in his course and stuff like that. And he talked about how Jefferson wasn't that great of a person, and he was a hypocrite because in person he was talking about being this very pure, work is good and you shouldn't drink that much and this and that, and behind the scenes he was banging people and owning slaves and drinking all the time, being a drunk. And same thing with like Martin Luther King was talking about being a good person, but yet he was being faithful and a good religious person, but yet he was banging a bunch of people. So he went into like just making all these untouchable people and just kind of breaking them down and saying, we should look at things from all angles and let it be what it is. And he got like bashed by everybody. He's like, most people walked out and all this stuff. And I thought that was awesome. Like, I think it's,
I told you I had that professor at Westfield,
which I would love for you to eventually
contribute
something to this podcast by getting him in.
Because he had that he didn't care about anything. Like nothing bothered him. Like
People
he
like
just
that
said what was on his mind, and he was brilliant and open-minded, and I think that like that was the thing. Like he was open-minded, and what made me realize like the people that walk out of classes like that, they're the ones that have closed minds. They can't hear this. You know, I remember the way he talked about religion and talked about different things in the Bible, and I remember thinking like the lightning is going to strike this guy. Like how, like I remember thinking like, how is God not just wiping this guy off the planet? Like it made me question the existence of God. And I got to know him personally and became friendly with him and just had a great relationship with him as a person. You know, he was never like Professor so-and-so, and he never took that perspective.
The cool thing about being a professor, and Thaddeus Russell and Daniele Bagnelli talked about this, how nobody ever walks into your class and sees what you're doing. Like, so he's like, the only thing the college cares about is that kids are signing up for your class. So you could be telling them the worst things ever, or, you know, like saying the most like, you know, anti-mainstream thing ever, and yet like nobody ever asks questions. So you have that freedom, which I think is awesome. And I think the other awesome thing is the fact that I don't know if these professors and teachers realize that years and years later, they're going to have students like yourself who's talking about them and still have a huge impact.
That's a long time ago. And this guy had
it was like the 60s, right?
Yeah, the 60s when college first, 1860s. but that's like a guy like Professor Bolelli. Then this guy, Tetrol was his name. They impact people because they're provocative and they have real conversations. You know what I mean? They're not up there just reciting what they know. Like this Taoist lecturer, he's explaining what he knows, but he's also intertwining how it's affected his life, and he's drawing different stories from different aspects of Chinese culture and telling little anecdotes that go along with that, and in a way of like, and he's like, you know, you don't have to take my word for it here, or we don't have to get into this. Like he just has a delivery that makes that's just really engaging, you know?
And I think that's reinforcing the idea of the ripple effect, and the idea that sometimes you don't realize you're having some impact on somebody's life or opinions or perspectives, and until like a long time after, and you realize like, holy shit, I did influence. And sometimes you just never know who you influence. People, you might be, you know, you might say something that somebody's repeating in their head that you don't realize they're thinking about, and it sticks with them, and it affects who they are and what, you know, their perspectives. That's why it to me, like this podcast, like just podcasts in general have changed my perspective and opinions, and just everything that's influenced me. I think is just all those things were important to kind of get me to where I am today, to not so much information wise, but I think the most important thing, whatever got me here, it taught me to,
certainly wasn't your free will.
No, it wasn't. It taught me to question things and reflect on things. And I think some of that did come from music. I think that's what makes musicians so interesting to me, is that there's something about, you almost can't prevent being a deep thinker when music is written, or a lot of times when you're writing music, you're tapping into your inner thoughts and feelings and emotions. And I think that it creates a more interesting person. And I think that it you know, you get something from, and don't get me wrong, there's probably a lot of like not interesting musicians, I'm sure. But I think a lot of the good ones, and a lot of the ones who you can usually tell from like their musical style, their lyrics and stuff like that.
If they're around for a long time, they're hitting a nerve with people. They're expressing emotion that we all can relate to.
New Kids on the Block are still around, so I don't think that's accurate. But I think that, and let's be honest, like
they're not really around though.
Yes, they are. They just toured like last year.
Yeah, but that's like a reunion type thing, and they're
like, around.
That was all the women that were reliving.
Well, this is another debate we have. Like, I'm not sure popularity has anything to do with how good you are.
Well, relevance. They have the relevance.
I think that
more than a nostalgic thing.
I know you're a big Pearl Jam fan, but I'm sure there's
That's right where I was going.
I'm sure there's a lot of albums that you love that didn't sell 1% of. You know. So and same thing with like documentaries. There's I talked about that one, Owned and Operated, a documentary that went pretty well. I mean, it got a whole lot of views up for our YouTube documentary. But I mean, I don't know how comparable it is to obviously a big film or whatever, or a big documentary. What's Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth or something like that. Which I think is completely trash compared to this guy's documentary, which is way more thought provoking, hits on a lot more topics, and I took a lot more out of than that. So I think that obviously how much something sells doesn't necessarily mean, and this goes back to, I think I had this conversation with you, this idea of like is why we like music and why certain music gets popular and doesn't or whatever. You looking at the time? You hungry?
Yeah, I'm starving.
Okay, so we'll wrap this up. But actually, just to let people know, I got some work slowing down and a little bit, and it'll be really slowing down in the next like 3 to 4 weeks. And once the winter comes, I hope to pop out a lot more of these podcasts. I have last night I stayed up late and I had to wake up early this morning, but I had to get some emails out. So just hit up a bunch of people that I haven't connected with recently, so I had to just reconnect to see if I could get some dates scheduled. I do have 1 Minute Silence. If you guys have heard me talk about them on the show, they're a band I grew up listening to. They were like my Rage Against the Machine, and just a huge fan of theirs. And the singer Yap's going to be on the show in December, so look out for that. And he's a really interesting dude because he's from Ireland, which usually molds pretty interesting people because we talked about it before the show how it seems like people from there, because of all the conflict with religion and with the UK and stuff like that. I think most people are politically aware of what's going on. But the other thing too, he has Asperger's, and he's pretty, I'm pretty sure he's pretty outspoken about it. I remember the first time he was supposed to be on, like when I first started the podcast, was one of the first people who was supposed to be on, and some reason we lost contact. I couldn't get a hold of him, and that was it. But one of the things he wanted to talk about was Asperger's, and so I think that's an interesting thing, how he's such a talented musician, and I'd never guess listening to them. And I saw them live. They're one of the first bands I that really like got scarred in my head. Like their live performance was one that stuck with me. I never forget the bassist at Local Bazooka in Worcester at the time, when they had that festival, WAAF, the local Boston radio station would have it, and he got on the big stack of speakers outside playing bass and jumped off it, and I'm just like a kid, and I'm like, this is fucking insanity, and he had his cordless bass, jumped off, and I'm like, this is fucking crazy. But that stuck with me, and it was they were such a cool band, and I'm glad that I listened to them long enough to actually pick up on their political stuff, because I had this conversation with Rao Reynolds from Enter Shikari a couple episodes ago when he was on. The idea that growing up, like some of the political music I listened to, I didn't realize was political, but I liked the music and I knew like there's something there, but I didn't get it. And as I got older, I'm like, holy fuck, like they're talking about this or they're talking about that. And so it's funny how, it's sometimes and I wonder if they were influenced. Like I didn't realize that it was kind of getting into me. The only song I really knew had a deep meaning was they had a song called Holy Man, and it was about I just always remember the chorus. He's like, am I supposed to feel something? Am I supposed to see something? And it was always this idea of like, yeah, you can convince yourself you're seeing it, but it's like, if you're just open minded, you're like, yeah, I don't see shit. Like when I go to a church and everybody's like feeling something and feel like, I don't feel anything, so it's just, but it was one of those things that kind of stuck with me at a young age. So did you have that experience with Rage Against the Machine, or did you know their message right early?
You know what? I knew they were pissed at a lot of stuff, but I wasn't, I don't think I share their same views, but I definitely.
No, but you knew they were political?
Yeah.
Well,
I mean.
Well, I don't think they're what I mean, I'm not that familiar with their specific views, so I can't say like I don't see myself disagreeing with. I know their songs, a lot of it does seem like, there's very little that I've heard from them that I disagree with. Like I feel like they're just angry about shit, and I feel like, you know what, man, when you're young and you live in this country and you start putting things in perspective that like things are kind of unfair, like the laws are written by are influenced by people who have money, and really like the rest of us are kind of get the shit end of everything. Like, I'd be pretty upset too, and it's kind of like Russell Brand now. Like everybody's like, oh, well, he's an actor, or a comedian, why should he have an opinion or whatever? But the fact that like, he talks about his drug addiction and stuff like that, and how that was a result of society and like a shitty situation. And I think that there's a lot to that. I think a lot of times people do end up being in a shitty situation because of society and not having the opportunities. I mean, it's unfair that some people, I was born into a decent family that took a risk of coming to this country and with not knowing a fucking lick of English, and they barely know any English now. I could just imagine when they came to this country. So, and so I was lucky enough that I had that. But there's a lot of people who were born in the worst part of New York, the city with like drug dealers and, so just like we don't all have the same opportunities and things. And I think that we should definitely do a better job of kind of, making things a fair playing field for everybody, because it is unfair, and it's unfair that some, and I think that internet's changed things because now everybody has access to information. But for a long time, if you didn't go to a good college, if you couldn't afford going to college, you went to high school and that was it, and then you got a working job. But at least at that time, doing jobs with your hands could actually make a decent living, where today, like, let's be honest, like you can work 2 jobs and make enough money to be broke, so it's but anyways, I'm ranting. But I am gonna have some musicians on too. I know that a while ago I talked to Fit for a King and Beyond All Recognition. Those are 2 artists that I'm hoping to have on very soon. Boki Nakbar is supposed to be on too. He was on London Real not too long ago. He's a NBA, played in NBA for a little bit, now plays in Spain for Barcelona, and really interesting dude. He actually does a podcast too, so super interesting guy, and I hope to have him on, talk a little bit about the meaningless sports we just bash. But he's I think sports.
No, we're not bashing sports. We're bashing.
Well, we're both sports fans, so that wouldn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But I think that it's. I understand, obviously, you being a wrestler in high school, and did you play any sports in college or no? No. But I mean, you grew up. You're always you do triathlons, for God's sakes. I mean, that's a pretty badass sport, So I think that we all have that competitive thing, and we appreciate people's drives and seeing the lengths we will push our bodies mentally and physically to accomplish something. I think we do all look up to that and appreciate that. But I think in the overall view, it's definitely not the only important thing. So it's cool to see a guy who you appreciate because he does something he loves, and you appreciate, his competitiveness and stuff like that. But yet he also looks things from outside the box, and there's more to him than just that. Because unfortunately, there's a lot of athletes most of them are just dumbasses. You know who Dante Stallworth is?
Yeah. He
played for the Patriots. Played for the Patriots for a year. Dude, super interesting dude. He did a interview on Breaking the Set, that show I watch a lot, and I was blown away by how fucking smart this guy was, and how he was up to date with current events, history. This guy, I'm like, this cannot be a football player. I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, this guy, there's no way this guy was and then I'm like, wait, why does he sound? I'm like, that's right, he played for the Patriots for a year. I think his last year in NFL,
so, yeah.
He played for the Patriots, and so there definitely is exceptions to the rule. But it's awesome to see that there aren't just people who in college we get the title student athlete, but really are just athletes. Some people actually end up learning some shit, and who knows? I mean, maybe it wasn't from college, maybe it was reading books or whatever. But it's cool to see that, because I think that stigma of all jocks and athletes are idiots, aren't true, because we're both athletic and handsome, and we get that title all the time. Look at those two. No, I'm kidding, but we just going to the gym all the time. And sometimes I wonder that. I'm like, I wonder if people just look at me like, oh, he's just another kid who likes to exercise and be in shape. But I wonder if there's anything else to him. And you don't want to get that title where you're just isolated. This isn't my life, because some people that is only their life. But as I rant on and on, I'll cut this one. But thanks, guys, for listening. I really appreciate it. It was an awesome show. I hope everybody tunes into this one, because, like I said, it's a Friday show. So hopefully I'll have more shows where I can control my anxiety. I'll have to have Dave here with me more often to do that, and just kind of have this casual conversation. This is the first time in a long time I really felt like we captured a conversation we would have had over lunch or dinner or whatever, that's true. Which is exactly the goal. 45 episodes later, I think we're getting closer to it, but which isn't that much when you look at some people who've had Joe Rogan's on 500 and something episodes. So, but thanks again, guys, and enjoy your weekend. If you listen to this on a weekend, hopefully I can get it out for the weekend. And thanks for listening, and we'll see you guys next time. Peace.
Believe in the ripple effect.